I think the most important thing that I have heard from other adoptive parents, like I said farther along, was that love just isn't enough. That um, you also, and that by having a Black or a brown person in your family doesn't wave a magic wand and make you not racist anymore. So I think um, it has meant that I just have to really examine my own racism and check it with other people and learn about it and not pretend that I have completely changed this person's life for the better just because I brought him to New England.
Good evening. I'm Susan Spurlock, Executive Director of Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University. I'm pleased to welcome you to the final program in our virtual 3-week storytelling series, Beyond Borders, Women's Stories, and the Art of Bearing Witness. Our previous women storytellers captivated us as they shared their work, which bears witness to struggles about human rights, memory, belonging, and love. We're in for a real treat this evening as we welcome performer, author, and teacher Phoebe Potts for a performance and discussion of her one-woman play, Too Fat for China, which chronicles her tragicomic journey to adoption, where she looks for more love, more life, more family. It is now my pleasure to introduce this evening's moderator, Dr. Shoshana Madmoni-Gerber, an associate professor in the Communication, Journalism, and Media Department at Suffolk University. Her research interests include intra-Jewish conflict in Israeli society, the role of the media in shaping the sphere of public discourse, especially in the representation of minorities and social conflict, representation of Arab Jews in popular culture, intercultural communication and activism, social protest, and social media. It is my pleasure. Shoshi.
Thank you so much, Susan. And many thanks to Annie and Lauren and the rest of the team at WGBH for producing this evening, and to my partners my colleagues from the College of Arts and Sciences, Michelle Plott, Yanni Moreno, and Barbara Abrams for preparing this wonderful series together. So I am thrilled to host Phoebe Potts today. Phoebe is an artist, comic, storyteller, a teacher, a friend, my friend, and a self-described professional Jew. We will talk about what that means in a minute. But mostly we will talk about her journey as she tried and failed and eventually succeeded in adopting Lemmy, a beautiful baby boy from Ethiopia. I watched Phoebe's one-woman show titled Too Fat for China last December in the Gloucester Theater, which feels like it was 10 years ago, when life was still normal. And I was really moved by her witty, thought-provoking account of, as she puts it, the things that she did for love. So throughout our conversation today, I want to try and bring you a taste of her touching, honest, and funny performance and some of the social, political, and moral questions her story raises. We will have you join with your questions a little later. So welcome, Phoebe.
Hi. I'm glad to be here.
I want to start from the very beginning. So you start talking about your upbringing in Brooklyn, New York, and how your childhood shaped your cultural identity, who you are today. So you say that in your neighborhood, everyone was indignant before breakfast and stories were the currency of relationship. Is that why you became a storyteller? What was it like to grow up, to be a child in your family?
Well, my parents were both journalists, my father in particular. So if you wanted the warm sunshine of my parents' love to fall down on you, you would better tell a good story. Like, we were never kids who could come home and they would say, "How was your day?" And we would just say, "Good." No. They needed a full description. Or you could, the tap would be turned off. You would be frozen out. So my brother and I got to be very good storytellers at a very young age. And Jewishness was just in the ether in Brooklyn back then. everything and everybody was Jewish. The lampposts, the Irish, the Puerto Ricans, like everybody was Jewish. And you felt bad for the kid who wasn't Jewish. So I would say both those things together definitely affected my ability to want to make things funny when they're not, to be able to bear them. I think that's a old Jewish practice, if not part of our ethnicity. And storytelling in order to stay tethered to my family.
An old trick of trying to make fun of the difficult moments.
Right.
So that brings me to the concept of being, I think maybe that's part of being a professional Jew, but what does it mean to be a professional Jew? Is it just anxiety? Is there more? I know you have a part where you compare your brain to the stress of a newsroom. Can you tell us a little bit about that? The professional Jew and that newsroom part. How does it connect?
So the professional Jew, I say, because my day job is running the local Hebrew school in Gloucester, Massachusetts, which is in a bite-sized synagogue in this cranky city by the sea. And when I wake up in the morning, the newsroom, which lives up here, gives me the headlines, mainly, all the bad things I've done and said, and all the bad things that have been done and said to me. But I'm also trying to be a practicing Jew because that is part of my job. So on the one hand, in the morning when you wake up and you're Jewish, you're supposed to thank God for returning your soul to you. So I wake up in the morning and I'm supposed to say, I'm alive today. And instead I wake up, and because I'm Jewish, which is different than being a practicing Jew, I say, I'm alive today.
There's room for improvement.
Always.
So one of the things that I love about how you tell your story and how you begin it is that you're just very candid about everything. So you talk very openly about your body type and your body image and how you feel about it and how it's connected to the adoption story, which is kind of a strange and funny twist. And that brings us to the title of your show and the very unlikely source to tell you that those few extra pounds are going to be a deal breaker. But before we get to my actual question about it, I wanted to share with the audience a little bit of the highlights from the show. So we will watch the promo and then get back to our conversation.
I suppose with my body type and speed, I identify as a manatee, which means that my pronouns would probably be. So the first thing I do before I even open my eyes is I check the internal headlines and I scan for the vital information that I need to start my day, namely who I've been disappointing lately and slights made against me. And then I know exactly how much dread I should feel before I even get dressed. The story I want to tell you tonight is about the terrible things that I did for love. When I couldn't get pregnant and we tried fertility treatments, I just wanted a tiny little baby because everybody else had one. So Jeff and I turned to adoption, and at first glance, there were a lot of choices on the adoption landscape. But when you read the fine print, you saw that rules and restrictions applied. China said that the adoptive parent had to have a body mass index no higher than a 29. So, at 5'3" and 168 pounds, I'm a 29 and a half. I'm teetering toward 30 on that mean BMI chart in your doctor's office. I had been waiting so long for someone to say it. Never did I imagine that it was going to be the People's Republic of China. Somebody asked me recently if it hurt my feelings that China said that about being fat. And I said, no. I feel like China really sees me. China. Okay, on the count of 3, say which country you want to adopt from. 1, 2, and Jeff says, America. And I say, gross, sweetie, why? Wait a second. In international adoption, the babies have been sitting in the fruit crates for a while. But in domestic adoption, you could get a fresh baby, raw, locally sourced. You could get a baby in utero, And at every single agency, we got the same response. It was a tilt of the head, click, and the question, are you open to race? Yes, I wanted more love in my story, but I also wanted more life in my story. I wanted everything. And I'm American. So I bought it.
That's just great. So there is a lot to unpack here. The commercialization of the process, the social pressure to have a baby, race and racial issues, and your perfectly understandable search for love in this way. So maybe let's start with China. It's kind of funny that they, in my opinion, that they have the BMI restrictions, but actually when you get pregnant, you get a license to be fat, right? So that's the only time where you can get fat and no one's gonna say boo, and definitely you don't need to wear Spanx. So how did you really feel about it? I love that someone asked you if you were insulted by this and you said, no, China really sees me.
I think it didn't hurt my feelings when I remember standing in my bathrobe, with all my largesse, reading the fine print on the brochures where it said body mass index no higher than 29. And I remember just being shocked that somebody finally said it. I had gained weight as an adult. I knew that according to this culture and my family, that was not okay. And yet no one would look me in the eye and be like, you're fat. And then here was the entire People's Republic of China going, fat lady, you're fat. Like, it was kind of exhilarating. I mean, those of us of size, we are in legion. Like, we're making this whole thing run, but we're largely invisible. So you can find us with our caramel lattes fused to our hands at the back of the rack at Old Navy every season, just, harvesting quietly. But it's not like anybody ever says, here come the fat ladies. Like, right. So the fact that it was so plain and obviously just very culturally different was kind of exciting.
Yeah, and it's the constant contradiction between actually not seeing you, not necessarily in a good way, but right. Fat shaming is a thing and you can't tell anybody, but then, what if it's not healthy? And
right,
my doctor's supposed to say something. And
I had a therapist who did not love the title of my show because she felt like by turning it into this kind of a joke. But I think there is something like from the Nora Ephron School of Screenwriting that if you fall on a banana and everybody laughs at you, that's bad. But if you tell the story about the time you fell on the banana, then you own that story. And I think saying, yeah, China said I was too fat, made it sort of steeled me to it.
Right, I agree.
It turns out I don't actually care what, the People's Republic thinks about my body size.
And we know already that you found a different path.
Right, and thank God. I mean, I wasn't actually, well, we'll get to that.
So I'm interested because the little snippet that followed it is you're saying when Jeff wanted a domestic adoption and you said, oh, sweetie, no. Why did you say that?
Because I didn't like the idea of some young woman in Ames, Iowa, looking at my profile, which is what birth parents get, and they get to choose who gets to adopt their child, that she would judge me on my ability to be a mother. I was extremely defensive, and I was angry that he was being so feminist because he wanted to adopt from the US because he figured that in this country, a young woman would have her rights protected and she would know about her choices, which of course is laughable. Young women's bodies apparently are of no value to this culture, but he thought that would be the right thing to do. I came around to the idea because I had a very shallow and myopic and self-involved focus, which was I could get a newborn, which for someone who couldn't give birth, that was very attractive to sort of get in on the ground floor.
The
Not
next
because,
best thing.
yeah, not because I'm a nice person or I agreed with my feminist husband. No, was full on misogynist, but I really wanted a tiny little baby. So I wanted it at its tiniest.
Do you think part of it is like the images that we are exposed to in the media? It's like this beautiful, mother and baby, like all this is described as this magical moment that, in some respects, reality is very different than
Well,
what
which part, birth or all of motherhood?
well, even birth is presented in a way that,
Right.
it just couldn't be
Right.
from the truth. But so you decide on domestic adoption and you go for it, and you have somebody pick you, which is great news, and you're going to Cincinnati, right? To Cincinnati, Ohio, and this does not end well. So I'm going to ask you to take us to that. You have a part when you talk about being in that delivery room, which is, it's very dramatic on the one hand, and kind of making you so much a part of that birth process.
Right.
So take us back there. What went wrong?
I find myself standing in a clean, bright, spacious hospital room in Cincinnati, Ohio, watching my son be born. The woman giving birth to my son, let's call her Letitia, is Black. The only other people in the room are the doctor and 2 nurses, and myself. We are all white. Letitia brings the child into the world. I'm handed a surgical instrument to cut the cord. The baby is wrapped up and put in my arms, and I start to cry. The nurse looks at me crying, then looks over at Letitia and jabs her thumb at me and says, "See that? That's love. That's love." But I don't say anything because I now know that I was in the lima bean stage of my white supremacy. So my lima bean white supremacy is when I'm faced with a nice, juicy opportunity to interrupt somebody else's racism. And instead, all my morals and values curl in on themselves and I go mute like a lima bean, and I wait for the racist moment to pass so we can get back to getting me what I want, which in this case was a tiny little baby. At that point, I had had a lot of experience with my lima bean white supremacy. When Jeff and I were first interviewing at adoption agencies, I guess my newsroom up here in my brain that keeps track of all my thoughts and feelings thought that honesty was the best policy. And so the moment we sat down with an adoption agent at every single agency, I would go, "We can only raise $26,000 off our condo. That's all we can get from the second mortgage, $26,000. And at every single agency, we would get this same robotically cheerful reply, a tilt of the head, click, and the question, "Are you open to race?" At which point I would say, "Do you mean if they're Black? Yeah, that's fine. That's no problem." And we learned that if we're open to race, well, an adoption in the US starts at $40,000. But if we are open to race, a Black baby girl can be had for $28,000. And we happen to have these bargain basement remaindered moldy babies, Black baby boys, for a steal at $24,000. And do I say, "What's the matter with you people?" Or "That's disgusting," or "I'm going to report you to the Attorney General"? No, 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 no. I lima bean. I look out into the parking lot at every agency and I see that sea of Subarus and Toyota Camrys. And I look around at their offices with the Guatemalan textiles hanging on the walls. And I figure, well, they must have their moral compass sorted out. I lima bean. The only thing I say is, okay, if that's how it's done. Later, when we fly to Cincinnati for the first time to meet Letitia to see if we are going to like each other and have this bond for the rest of our lives, I'm talking to the adoption agent there. Let's call her Mrs. Crook. And I say, hey, I know Letitia's legally old enough to do this adoption, but shouldn't we meet her family? Like, shouldn't we know her folks? And Mrs. Crook says, oh no, they would never approve of this. And I say, well, so what is she gonna do? Because one day she'll be really pregnant, and then there'll be this other day where she's really not pregnant. And Mrs. Crook said, I told her to tell them what I tell all girls in her situation. I told her to tell them the baby died. And do I say, oh, you're a monster, or this conversation is over, we're leaving, or I'm going to report you to the Attorney General? No, no, I want the tiny little baby. I lima bean. All I say is, oh, okay, well, if that's how it's done. So standing here in the hospital room in Cincinnati, holding my son, I start to cry. And when the nurse says, you see that? That's love. That's love. I think, no, you bag of old milk. It's not love, it's psychic nausea. Because one of the side effects of my lima bean white supremacy is this horrible seasickness of the soul. Like, I'm getting everything I want, but it's all wrong. That was the last time I ever held that baby.
So, and I imagine that was the last time you also saw Mrs. Crook?
Yes, there were a few other phone calls, but yes, she disappeared, as did quite a bit of our money. And that young woman ended up making a decision to have the baby stay in Cincinnati, which, while very painful for me personally, I have come to understand was an enormous sacrifice on her part and a great maternal act, because nobody was behaving like a mother that day except for this young woman.
It's amazing that even the way that you describe it, that and I often think about the concept of institutionalized racism and our privileges and how we behave and how we create experiences for ourselves, and the entire experience that put her in this situation and put you in the situation and kind of brought you together. And then she's facing all these authority figure and a real mom that's about to take her baby, and then she has the medical authority telling her, you see this, this is love. It's as if saying what you are doing is not love. And again, that, you know, maybe saving moment in the way that it's marketed. So part of it is, you know, it's a concept that's tough to explain to students when you talk about social location and privilege and the different things that brought you to where you are and brought her to where you are. And
I think you see those. I mean, I really think that's where the rubber hits the road with white people's privilege, is that when it gets in the way of something we want, and when I say thing, I mean thing. I'm very aware that these are babies, which is also why this story, I think, is so shocking to people when you hear like the pricing, like what will the market bear for a Black baby boy? I mean, it's appalling. And yet that is, I think we don't notice these things or really care about these things until not only does it affect us, but it affects our things that we need or want.
Right. So I'm wondering, why is it that we think of ourselves as enlightened and progressive, and when we get to this moment, right? I want my iPhone, or I want my whatever it is that I want. Like in that moment, I'm not. And as you say, the commercialization of this process. I mean, there's been, you know, trafficking in babies. All that, it's still going on. Trafficking in human beings. I mean, you know how slavery happened in this way.
Right.
We were trafficking in human beings to our gains, and it didn't bother us to write in the Constitution, all men are created equal. So why is it that we are in that moment not taking a stand?
I think the power to conform is an intense power to want to be in your group. So I definitely wanted a child because I wanted in on that experience. I also, when it came down to it, I really did want more love. I wanted a bigger team. Um, I also think that as we were going through it, none of the authorities, as you put them, said to me, this is kind of messed up why this is happening. And so when I would ask the question of friends or of lawyers or whatever, I would be reassured that I was the right answer to the child's life, that this was an act of sacrifice that I was doing, and it was actually a family member of mine said, "Why is Letitia giving her baby away?" Which is also not the way we talk about adoption. It's not like she was like, doing a Marie Kondo purge of her house and said, "Well, this one baby doesn't give me joy." But the reason was she already had two little babies. And my family member snorted into the phone. I was like, "Hasn't she heard of birth control?" And what was so amazing about that question was that this family member has three kids. And she said it with no irony. And I got off the phone and I remember thinking, wait, why does she get to have three kids and that is celebrated and fine, but Letitia doesn't? And frankly, thank God Letitia's having another one because I really want a baby. So it was so like, it was just sort of like I was getting high off my privilege and my family member's privilege but that's where actually I started really asking the question, what makes babies available for adoption? And how does this happen? And that's where I learned about what makes it possible for me to adopt and what makes it impossible for people to hold on to their children.
Right. And how come she gets to decide ever many babies she wants, and somebody I remember a little while ago we had a film at Suffolk that we hosted about poverty, and so many of the people that were interviewed were women, and I knew as we were showing it, the director came from Spain, that somebody is going to say immediately, why do they have so many babies? So we get very judgmental about that, and we think that it should be done in the way we do it in the West, that it should be planned, and we're sort of commercializing our own babies because we think about how money does it cost to raise a baby, and we didn't necessarily used to think about it like that. Right. And who gets to have it and who doesn't.
Right. So and I think all along the way, I was told this was all through my fertility treatments. No one ever said, yeah, maybe it's just not you. Like, maybe you don't get to do this. Like, no one, because I was making the fertility companies lots of money, but also it was seen as my birthright as a white woman of means to have children.
Right.
And I don't know that that's really good for everybody. Like, I don't know that that's really great for our community.
No, and part of it, I'm thinking about, like, can you really ever make a decision about that? Or it's more some urge that right. You're, because I remember we were thinking about it, like, the world is crazy. Should we have babies? I'm talking 99, 2000. And now when I think about it, like, we need a new word for crazy. We're still having babies. So after that tough experience, you're thinking, is it then that you're thinking, okay, I'm going to go with international adoption?
So I had always wanted to go to Ethiopia because I knew that without giving birth to my own baby, and so sort of passing on all that genetic material, I needed to have some really good stories that bound us together. And to me, Ethiopia already had three. They're just part of its landscape. So, and just briefly, those stories are Lucy, which is the ape that stood up and became the first hominid. She's the grandmother of us all. Her bones were found in Ethiopia. And she connects us to the fact that we all became human in Africa, and we all come from Ethiopia. The other story, so I could tell him that we are all derived from the same place. I could tell him that the Queen of Sheba was Ethiopia, and she really wanted an heir. So she got pregnant. She used King Solomon of Jerusalem as a sperm donor. But before she gets pregnant, she converts to Judaism. So her baby, Emperor Menelik, becomes the first Jewish emperor of Ethiopia. And every emperor, all the way up until the 1970s to Haile Selassie, claimed him as an ancestor. And apparently, the story says Solomon sent 12,000 Hebrews so that his son could grow up in a Jewish community in Sheba. And they're referred to as like the lost tribe of Israel.
Right.
I don't think they thought they were lost. I think that's what Ashkenazi Jews say. But so there's this legitimate ancient Jewish connection there. And then the other story is just the Cadillac of adoption stories, which is that the Nile River begins in Ethiopia and runs north through Egypt to the Mediterranean. And I could tell my son that he was born to a woman at this end of the Nile and was adopted by a family who wanted him very much. And at the other end of the Nile, another little baby was born. And you all know this story. And his name was Moses.
Yeah.
And Princess Batia, the daughter of the Pharaoh, adopts him. And with the help of his birth mother, Yochebed, raises him to be a nice Jewish boy who carries forward the life of our people.
Right.
So I could say he's in good company among adopted children.
But no pressure there.
No, not at all.
So when you, while you encountered all these dilemmas and issues with the domestic adoption, you're going through with the international adoption, and it looks like you encounter quite a few other set of questions that it doesn't really hit you until you get to the airport. And I love this scene that you do in the show because it feels to me that you're almost speaking from a place of an observer, that it's outside of you, about you. Can we go back to that airport?
Let's do it.
Ababa.
We arrive at the Bole airport in Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia, in the middle of the night. And we've been in the air for 17 hours, and I feel as though there's like a hairy trout in my mouth, and my eyes have been marinated in popcorn. But we walk up to this gleaming edifice of a terminal, and the doors open, and I get that same hushed feeling of awe that I get when I go to that sacred place, Our Lady of Whole Foods. Because just like in Whole Foods, laid out in front of me in neat rows are dozens of tiny little Ethiopian babies. And as I'm admiring their cheeks and their toes and their noses, it takes me a good 4 seconds before I realize that these tiny little Ethiopian plum babies are attached to actual Ethiopians. And my head has been in the adoption literature for so long that I've conveniently forgotten, or at least put aside, that in order to get an Ethiopian baby, you need Ethiopian parents. And here they all are. They're the parents and the grandparents and their brothers and their sisters and their aunties living their Ethiopian lives in Ethiopia, awaiting Ethiopian family and friends to return from trips. And as this is loading in the computer, this understanding about the Ethiopians making baby Ethiopians, I'm aware of another current of energy at the far end of the terminal. It's a line of people, and they're going through the departures door to planes that are going to Europe and America. And these people in that line are all Jeff and Phoebe doppelgangers, like same LL Bean raincoats, same REI backpacks, same Nalgene water bottles, same reason for being in Ethiopia, just blonde and from Dubuque, so not Jewish and minus the stormy outlook. Because each of these Jeff and Phoebes have a tiny little Ethiopian plum baby on their arms, like their souvenir from their trip to Ethiopia. And I start to realize that those people, those Ned and Nancy neocolonialists, those Ken and Karen colonizers, those are my people, not the Ethiopians right here. And I start to get a little dizzy, and I think I can almost see the man in the yellow hat with his son, Curious George, when somebody speaks at the side of my face and cuts through my bleariness, and I turn, and there's another Karen colonizer standing in line with me. She's wearing a peasant blouse, made by peasants. And she's speaking to her husband, but she says to me, I hope we see Jedediah tomorrow. And it's meant to be an invitation to compare notes about adoption. And normally I would totally take it because there's no better resource in the adoption process than an adoptive parent who's farther along in the journey than you are. But I don't take it because I hate her, because I hate myself, because I hate international adoption, because I hate that the only reason that I'm standing here at the Bole airport in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia about to get my baby Ethiopian is because I have a mortgage. And the only reason I have a mortgage is because Jeff's parents and my parents gave us money for the down payment on our condo. And the only reason they were able to give us money for the down payment on our condo is because they're white. And the only reason they're white is because Jeff's dad and my dad came of age immediately after the Second World War, served in the US Army, and so received the benefits of the GI Bill. So stay with me for just a second. Our families are immigrant families, like so many families in this country. They came from Scotland and Hungary and Russia and Poland. And when they got here, they were seen as trash, immigrant trash. But when our dads came of age, immediately after the Second World War, they served in the US Army. And the US Army gave them the GI Bill, benefits of the GI Bill, which meant that they got low interest housing, free college tuition, access to affordable healthcare, regular healthcare. And they were able to take those benefits and get married and have jobs and go to college and own property and pass that all on to their children. But the Army only gave the GI Bill to its soldiers who were not Black and not brown. The Army made our dads white. They went in the Army as immigrant refuse, and they came out the other side, white men. The Army made them white, and the GI Bill made them middle class. And where'd the Army get the money to pay their not Black GIs? The Army got the money from the US government, who got the money off the trillions of dollars of interest that it had accrued off of hundreds of years of free labor, off the backs of millions of African slaves that it had stolen from Africa. So here I am. I've brought that whole colonial slave trade full circle. I want a baby, I have a mortgage, one will be provided for me, and I don't really know how. Now, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're gonna say. You're gonna say, Phoebe, Ethiopia wasn't in the colonial slave trade, you'll say to me. Ethiopia has never been colonized except for that brief kerfuffle with Mussolini. Ethiopia is the only nation in Africa, besides Liberia, that's never been colonized. And you'd be absolutely right. But I am here because I have ridden on a wave of cash and credit that was not of my making. So let's be very clear. There are children in every nation in this world who need families. The UN says that they number in the tens of millions. Every single country has orphans that need families. I mean, except for probably Sweden. But international adoption is not about finding families for children who need them. International adoption is about finding babies for white people who can afford them. And I'm not just throwing international adoption under the bus on this. Like, I'm the demand in supply and demand. And I know all of this. And I'm doing it anyway. So what am I to make of that? I guess never doubt the resolve of a white lady who is shopping for her family.
Wow, Phoebe, that is a lot to take in. And that is a lot to carry when you start this journey. How do you, I guess my question is, how do you handle this? How do you reconcile having all this guilt when you're at the happiest, also at the happiest moment in your life? How do you balance? How do you make sense of all these trains of thoughts that seem to me that they're hitting you all at the same time?
I think I don't know actually that I felt so much guilt. I mean, I obviously didn't feel so much that I didn't do it. I think for me, being honest about what was happening, especially, once I had him securely mine and we had gotten the papers and we had gotten his US passport and everything was signed, then and only then could I really look back and say, what was that about? What was really happening? So I want to be clear about that. I was not virtuous at all during the process, other than to ask questions as much as I could so that I could hold on to it for him and for his story. I think all of us are actually complicit in this. Like you mentioned the phone, like most of us just don't see the people that we're exploiting. Most of us are cushioned from the violence of our exploitation of other people. And that's of course part of the problem, because without seeing it, we can't be called upon any kind of like moral response to it if we're not really aware that it's happening or choosing not to be aware. Being honest about the adoption process actually I find to be really liberating, because there isn't any secrecy around it. And it's not as though I sit our son down and tell him in chapter and verse about every step of what has happened, but he's very aware of his story and about how we came together as a family. And he's more and more aware of what it means to have left there. And that will just be part of the whole tapestry of our story, to use a cliche.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not like we walk around going, I shouldn't have done this. Like, I'm totally glad I did this because I wouldn't have known this guy. And it's an honor to be his mother. And there's an enormous amount of action and activity and energy we have to put into this to make sure that we don't just pretend to now everything's fine. Like we can't, that we can't do, and we won't.
Right, and that brings me to one question before I bring some students to join us. So it's been 10 years, and thinking about the enormity of this job, mother. What do you think about it now that you have 10 years of experience under your belt? What this has been like for you to be a mother?
So pretty soon after he came home, I remember walking him down to the boulevard here in our town and seeing all the senior citizens walking around like their kids were long gone. And I had this just wave of jealousy. Like I couldn't wait to be retired. Because as much as I love this person, and I love every cell of this person, the job of being a mother it's a sucker's deal. It's a sucker's deal. It's unbelievable that we've been bamboozled into raising the next electorate of the United States for free.
Right.
And not only that, but we are constantly criticized about how we do it by ourselves, from others, from our own children. Like we are constantly criticized. We're never going to get it right. And we're supposed to love it. We're supposed to love being a mom. When I grew up, mothers were like either they were minefields or they were mountains. Like you didn't mess with them. But now you're supposed to be their rock and their best friend. When I was a kid, if your mom was your best friend, there was something wrong with you.
Right.
But now the job description just gets longer.
Right.
And I don't think it's weird that the job description has gotten longer as more and more women have not just gone back to work by choice, but have to go to work outside the home.
Right. So now we have to be super mom and super career and super everything and happy all the time and wearing my pearls when I do my houseworks and so on.
And your kids are the most important, and to show up for your kids. And it's like, well, if they're so damn important, then help me pay. Like, let's get some good paid childcare for people. Like, let's have everybody, like, let's have affordable healthcare. Like, let's have all the things. If my kids are, family's the most important, I can't do that all by myself. Like, what you're telling me needs to be done is impossible on my salary. and with this many hours in a day.
Right.
Oh, and you want me to document it and put it on Instagram. Like,
Of course.
it's an impossibility. It's a sucker's deal.
Yeah. And you make some really good suggestions that other countries have it. So I don't know, if you're running for office, you have my vote.
Right, never gonna happen, but I appreciate that.
So we're going to bring the students. I have 4 students that we invited to ask you questions. And then another student will join us a little later. They're all journalism students or global and cultural communication students. And in these classes, we discuss issues of race and privilege and social location and how our different positionality or cultural identities affect our experiences, as you so nicely demonstrated many of the concepts that we've discussed in the textbook. So first we have Haley Michaels.
Hi, I'm Haley. I'm a senior global cultural communications major at Suffolk. And after hearing your story and your feelings through the whole process, and being aware of your own privilege, how did you actively avoid contributing to the white savior complex that frequently occurs during adoptions between white parents and children from non-Western countries? And what mindset do you recommend potential adoptive parents have during this process?
Great question. Yeah.
Thank you, Haley. Yeah, great question. I think I actively participate in the not having a savior complex by just having so much self-loathing that it's impossible to imagine myself saving anybody. I think that's definitely a part of what's happening with white people adopting Black and brown people. Certainly that's what, like, the reaction I got from the community when I brought him back, like that I brought him to a better place, which depriving him of his culture and his homeland didn't add up for me. I think the most important thing that I have heard from other adoptive parents, like I said farther along, was that love just isn't enough. That you also, and that by having a Black or a brown person in your family doesn't wave a magic wand and make you not racist anymore.
Mhm.
So I think it has meant that I just have to really examine my own racism and check it with other people and learn about it and not pretend that I have completely changed this person's life for the better just because I brought him to New England.
So being very self-aware.
I think it's an awareness, like a muscle, or like the fact that you know that you need more fiber in your diet. Like it just becomes, it's not like this, like, oh, I've got to think about racism now. I've got to think about this, the differential and the power. No, I think it's just like it should hopefully become part of how you live a balanced life.
Next we have Lauren Camo.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a junior print and web journalism major here at Suffolk. So for my question, as someone who took the path of adoption, do you feel that there was a greater sense of equality within your marriage during this important time, as both you and your husband got to be hands-on on the preparation for your son's arrival, unlike the experience of what it would be like if you were to have a natural birth?
That's such an interesting question. Thank you. I don't know what it would be like to give birth or to do that, because I didn't get to do it. So I can't speak to that. I can tell you that in my marriage, I'm generally 6 to 72 months ahead of my husband emotionally. So pushing us through the adoption process, like that was definitely me. Like he did make the case for a domestic, as we talked about, but he mostly was just like, I need this person to be happy in order to be happy, so I'm gonna go along. So I would say a lion's share of, the paperwork and the stuff that needs to be done, and sort of had the vision of us as a family. And it wasn't until that the person came home, or actually a little bit before, it was my husband who figured out that on Lufthansa, on the planes, there are these bassinet seats where you can get a bassinet for the baby, but you got to make sure, like, you work some magic to make sure you get one of the bassinet seats. And he did that for the plane ride home. Like, he was all over that. He's our consumer advocate. and then since he's been home, I married the right person. So Jeff does probably 51% of the childcare and 98% of the cooking. Like if it were up to me, we would just all be eating Crispix all the time. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how it is in my house.
Right. Yeah, I guess there's something to the notion that when two people are expecting in this way, you know, the adoption, it's a little different than my mother caring, you know, and going through the motion. And, you know, some couples like to say, we are pregnant, and
Yeah.
no.
No, we're not. No, we're not.
One person doing the throwing up. But that was a great, interesting way to think about it. Next, we have Dylan Gale. Dylan?
You very clearly articulated your issues within the adoption system, and I was wondering, in what ways do you think that the adoption process could be made easier for prospective parents while ensuring that children go to a quality family? And I ask this because to me, it really seems like, in a way, it's a balancing act that has the intention of ensuring safety, but also has the tendency to go to unreasonable extremities. So I was wondering, really, how you think the process could change to make it more beneficial for all parties involved.
That's a great question. I don't know that I have one answer. I think once, if I'm not alone in this, is once you adopted your kid, you kind of never look back at how the sausage was made. And I would say, though, that it does feel like in adoption in this country, it felt very much like the Wild West, where different agencies weren't regulated. States had different laws, so that it would be better if there were a federal program that was regulated. But also, I think because of the amount of money involved, and because I think, I don't know what they do. Did they just like get high and say that one's $40,000? Like, I don't know how they figure it out, but because of the money involved, and this was also true in international adoption, it creates just this temptation around the business and not about what's good for the kid. And in fact, there's already a lot of systems in people's families and organically, like kinship in the African-American community, that already is there, that would be much better for children than to then make African-American folks go through this adoption process, which is very much about money and very geared toward white people and is mostly staffed by white social workers. So I guess I'm not giving you an answer. I'm just showing you that there's more problems. But I think the money is a big problem, a big part of it. And by just sort of like writing it off as a business is where really terrible things happen.
So you're saying that the commercialization of the process is bringing about an inherent problem.
Yeah, right. So it's interesting that at the time, the federal government actually gave us money back, like would give you money back if you adopted internationally. I think they gave us, it was like 13 grand at the time, which is a lot. And then there was an exact 100% markup on the international adoption. And that does include the travel and all the other fees, which brings us closer to 45 grand in the end. But it was really interesting that the money that it took to do the adoption, that does not stay in Ethiopia, or in the case of Letitia in Cincinnati, money that did not go to her. It goes to, because then you would be literally selling your own child. But it's just weird that it doesn't go to her. It's weird that it doesn't go to her community. It's weird that it stays with the middle people in the adoption agencies. Now, having said that, I think that adoption is also really important. There are, as I said, the UN has said, there are tens of millions of orphans. Like, there's people who need homes now, and there's people who want to have more family and who can do it. So I'm not pulling up the walkway behind me to the ship. I just don't have the answers. Isn't that helpful of me?
And lastly, we have Eric Chen. And Eric is from China.
Hi, my name is Eric Chen, and I'm a graphic design student in Suffolk University. I'm a senior, and I'm from China. And I'm sorry that you have been through all this craziness in China, and I'm sorry my people call you fat, and I don't think you're fat. And so I know adopting is very complicated process in China, even for animals, for pets. And I know there are rules for adopting a cat from a rescue center where my friend has worked at, such as applicants' apartment has to have closed spare safe room and a closed balcony. The applicants must have at least 3,000 yen monthly income. And the reason for the first rule is because kitties need to be in a safe room when first adopted.
Uh-huh.
Kitties should not be able to go outside.
Okay.
And for the second rule, 3,000 yen is based on the average cost of kitty, aka 5,000 yen a month. And the average rent cost range in Guangzhou, which is 1,000 to 1,500 yen.
Okay.
So what other rules did they have that were somehow unreasonable when you were trying to adopt a baby? And what were the official reasons for those rules?
You know, thank you for that. No need to apologize. I've never asked what was the reason you couldn't be fat. I'm not sure that you couldn't fit on the seats in the plane. I don't really know. I do know that the other thing that they said was a deal breaker was you could be on antidepressants, which as you've been in America for a while, we are all medicated. And I can't imagine being a parent without being on medication. And what's really crazy is that you make my medication. Like, you make the bottles it comes in. You make the ink that prints my dosage. Like, every day, huge container ships leave China and enter the port of Los Angeles, just filled to the brim with Zoloft and Wellbutrin and Celexa and Paxil. So I mean, do the Chinese think we're putting it in our crops? Like, what are we doing with all these antidepressants? So that was amazing to me. Like, why you would want a skinny, deeply depressed parent as opposed to somebody who's sort of fat and regulated. But that was one of the things. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, that's, I think I love the part about the pets, because that, I think, kind of provide you with a good perspective that even that is very much scrutinized.
Right.
So thank you to all the students for your lovely questions. And we will go now to some questions from the audience. And we have Kirsten asking, given what you've learned, what advice would you give to parents considering transracial adoption? That's a great question.
Yeah. I think you have to be, you have to do a number of things. You have to, certainly do the work on yourself, examine your own privilege, your own racism, which I'm saying, and I love that it's almost cliche that I say that, which means to me that that doing that kind of stuff is more mainstream, that we're thinking about anti-racism so regularly, and we can say those words and we all kind of know what we're talking about. I think keeping the channels open to Ethiopian culture. I think being really respectful of who your child is and understanding that there can be painful at times, but there's limitations in what, I know there's limitations in what we can help him with or teach him about because we are white. And so that means going to Black spaces, like getting out of our very self-segregated comfort zone. Like, I self-segregate all the time. And then when I knew our child was coming home, like, I started seeing Black people in my neighborhood and I would go like this to them, like, which was really stupid and annoying and embarrassing, I'm sure, for everybody concerned. But I did hear a really great piece of advice from a Black woman who had been adopted by white parents, and she coaches adoptive parents now. And one adoptive parent asked her, why is my Black daughter constantly being friends with all these white girls when I send her deliberately to a multicultural school so she can have Black friends? And the coach said, well, does she see you loving Black people? And I thought, oh, okay, I didn't know that was allowed. Like, I didn't know I was allowed to do that too. And so with a little bit of creativity and making a bunch of dumb mistakes along the way, like we have definitely opened up our hearts and our yard and our lives to have people of color, so that so that he can see us, that it's not just him, but to sort of mesh our families with other families of color. And while I know that also sounds like, hey, go get yourself some Black friends, that there is a part of it that's also like, yeah, kinda, because otherwise I keep him just in a white world. I don't know. He's only 10 and I'm still figuring this out. So I guess that's what I've got so far.
Yeah,
Check with me in another 10 years.
yeah. It sounds like there's a lot to consider, and that it's kind of on a daily basis. And we have another question from Ron that's kind of related. And he's asking, have you been back to visit Ethiopia with your son? And if not, do you intend to bring him there?
Yeah, so no, I haven't, but I've been saving for it for a few years now because I want to go for a while. We definitely have connected to other Ethiopian adoptees here in the States, the Ethiopian community around Boston. We have some friends from who are Ethiopian in New York. I mean, he doesn't remember it. So it's sort of up to us to make those connections and have those friendships for when he is curious about it. I just wanted to say one more thing about being a transracial family. So you become aware very early how white our world is when you have a Black kid. And I have a lot of brown and Black crayons and pencils. And I have gone, starting when he was very young, through his books, darkening people so that he could see himself in picture books. Or he has this book about Greece and another one, like the Greeks weren't white, but they're drawn as like Caucasian. And I've gone through and like, I browned them all up. And he now tells me I didn't have permission to do that. And he's right. But there are all kinds of things like that that you start noticing where he doesn't, so that Black kids don't see their own experience reflected back to them.
The representation all around us is so thin that
yes,
we, like, do all these things artificially.
Right.
Because it's just not there. We have Ruth asking, what are some of books or resources you use to build your story, think it through and inform it? And I think she means that text, your storytelling, your performance, I think.
Like who do I like, what do I like to read about? You mean like the content of my work or being a performer?
It sounds like the resources that you used to help you construct your story, if I'm understanding her correctly.
Yeah, so I love to watch stand-up comedy. I don't think I'm a stand-up comedian, but I really love watching it. And I love Sarah Silverman, and I love Dave Chappelle, and I love Chris Rock, and I love the way they construct their sets. And I love the way they tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think definitely been influenced by comedians, even though I do, again, I do not consider myself one. I think what they do is much harder. And then for reading, I read everything. But I'm trying to think. I mean, yeah, why don't I stop there?
Probably everything you're exposed to is directly or indirectly.
Well, yeah, I mean, like one of my big influences is Howard Stern, the radio host, who I think is incredibly honest. Like the best radio he does is around his family for me and about his own therapy. And I listened to him for years, and he's a beautiful interviewer, better than Terry Gross, I think. And he is incredibly empathetic despite his crazy sophomoric misogyny. And I think just listening to the way he talked about himself and his family just gave me tremendous confidence that like what I was doing anyway was worthy of doing publicly. I don't know if I just lost a lot of friends by saying that, but that's true.
But you get some new ones. I'm sure.
Right, Shoshi, silver lining. Well done.
And I just want to mention in regards to comedy that, I mean, we're witnessing such a new era of, or renewed, where they're the voice of reason. They're like the social critics. They're the people who tell it like it is. That's where I go to see
Right.
even news coverage, right?
Yeah.
With criticism, just the
Yeah.
way
Oh,
it should be.
this woman, Dulce Sloan, who's on the Daily Show. Oh, like she's so great. And then she's another one who owns Body Type.
Right.
But yeah, I'd much rather get my news through someone who's like raising an eyebrow at you, like, really this? And yeah, or John Oliver or Seth Meyers. I mean, that's as the only way really to get through this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know that I'd get out of bed or just hide in the basement.
Or you'd have more antidepressant.
Might even just start cutting it like loaves of bread, just like big slices.
We have another question from Ron regarding possible use of, and I don't know if it's divided like are there Jewish adoption agency? I guess I'm adding that, are there a Jewish adoption agency? And if so, did you use them? And and he's asking that, if you use them, were they just as racist as the other agencies?
Yeah, I met Jews in the process who were racist for sure. I didn't use there was Jewish Friends and Family Service or something. I didn't use them. I did talk to them. I found, I know that Massachusetts DCF has a lot of problems, but it does a very good job in placing the birth family at the center, as opposed to just being like basically a breeder so when I called and said, hey, I want a baby, they said, we don't actually promise you babies. Like, we are looking for foster parents and our goal is to unify the family. Now that's very complicated because not everybody can be reunified. And I know people who are foster kids it's a tremendous struggle, but I really thought Massachusetts is very humane in that way, in prioritizing the birth mother and her connection to the child, and also not telling people like me, like, yeah, let's see what we can do. We can get you a baby, come over here. Like, none of that stuff. Sorry, the Jewish part though, I mean, I definitely met Jews who were racist in the process.
I wrote a book about it. We have a kind of a related question from Debbie. Did you consider adopting from foster care through the Department of Children and Families?
Yeah, that's what I was just talking about.
That's what you were talking about.
Right. And we did consider it. I really did. I wanted I wanted the full experience, from baby to forever. And I didn't want to be a transitional spot, although I think I really admire folks who do that. And I think it's a beautiful thing.
We have another question here. I don't know who's asking it, but what is the difference of performing and preparing on Zoom versus the performance that you did in person? That's an interesting question.
Yeah, well, I miss you guys. I know you're out there, but I really love performing live, and I like the energy. Luckily, I also love Shoshi, and I get her face the whole time, and she's my pal, so I get a little bit of that. I would say that the folks at GBH too have really made this like feel elevated, so that it's not, I do Zoom all the time, like probably most of you guys every day for my job, but this definitely has felt a little more elevated. And also I have all these like house lamps pointed at me, which is not normal. So
that's a very different Zoom.
And I got out of my jammies.
Yeah, that's a very different Zoom experience. I have another question from Rhonda, which I'm not sure I totally understand, but I'll give it a shot. She's asking, did being a Jewish have any influence or impact on anyone or anything? I guess she means along the way or the process, because being Jewish is very...
Where do we begin? Like, when hasn't it had an impact? I'm not laughing at you, Rhonda. It's just such a great open-ended question. Yes, no, sometimes, all the time. That's awesome. There's definitely, I feel the Jewish connection with Ethiopia was meaningful to me because I was looking for something. I was looking for some ties that made it feel real,
Right.
authentic, connected.
And the looking inward and the joking and
For sure. I mean, we've been storytellers for as long as we've been Jews. That is our tradition, is constantly telling a piece of the story every week on Shabbat from the Torah. That is what binds us together as much as anything else. The buildings don't matter to us. It's these stories, and that that you can go anywhere in the world on Shabbat and find other Jews who are looking at Torah together. So
yeah.
Absolutely, the connection to storytelling is matrilineal. It's running through my veins.
Right, and that in part I think is also a connection to the entire humanity. We are all storytellers, and we're all storytellers all the time, and we do it in different ways.
Right.
So I have somebody's also, Jared is asking if you plan to perform this anywhere, anytime soon.
Well, I have no plans because there's this global pandemic right now. And so it's making it impossible for anybody to go to see live theater, I think. I'm dying to get back out there though. So Jared, if you have any ideas, I'll take them.
Pretty soon we can't be outside because that was going to be my idea. But that's done.
Yeah.
There was one more question that I meant to ask you, and is raising a Black child in America right now is something that's giving you pause, is something that keeping you from sleeping at night. It's like another layer of worry, which I know it's the middle name of every mother.
Right.
How are you dealing with that?
I'm worried. I have been worried. I think just because of trying to be as honest as possible about the adoption story, and then having him when he came home and being Black with white parents, I've been really trying to pay attention to Blackness and the Black experience in America. So I guess what I'm saying is, it's not like I already knew this stuff. I didn't already know it, but I was already thinking about it. My son turned 10 right around the time that George Floyd was filmed being murdered. And I am definitely worried that as he moves out of sweet childhood and wants to be a surly teenager, which is his right, that he will start to be seen as a threat by white people. And he'll start to be seen as a threat by the police. And my whiteness will not shield him from that. My whiteness might be able to get him a lawyer or get him help, but like my whiteness will not shield him from his everyday experience. And I'm worried. I'm incredibly worried. I'm worried.
Yeah, I don't have any good advice to say about this.
Like it's not odd, but he really likes hoodies. And I can't help but think of Trayvon Martin. And I mean, he likes having his hood up. It makes him feel comfortable. He likes having his ears covered. He likes having pockets and put his hands in it. And he's wanting more and more independence. So we let him ride down the street to see a friend on his bike. And we have been talking about him, or doing the so-called talk about how to talk to police and how to talk to other people that might stop him. And it's heartbreaking to have to explain to this beautiful human being who knows right and wrong, like that this thing might happen. But it's essential that he he know and that he be as prepared as possible, but also feel confident to go. I can't say that I am getting it right.
That Hoodie might be in danger.
Right.
Yeah. So I think we can move now to, I wanted to share, I asked the students in class to write this response in regarding something we were reading about race and culture, and to share a personal experience. And I have an exchange student from Denmark. Her name is Maria Alexandra. And she shared something, and that just happened a week ago, something very touching about her experience of being adopted from Colombia in Denmark. So again, appearing different, looking different. And I asked her if she would kindly share this with us. And she agreed, even though it's the middle of the night in Denmark now.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm, yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Until now, Maria.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's very interesting. Yes, as Shoshana told, my name is Maria, and I live in Denmark, and I am right now as a exchange student here at Suffolk. I live in Aalborg. I study in Aalborg University, where my major is communication. Yes, and also what Shoshana said, I am adopted from Colombia and now live in Denmark, where all people are very Scandinavian. So all my friends have blonde hair and blue eyes. So therefore I stand out a bit. Yeah, my mother and I think that we look the same in some ways, but we also know that that can be an option. But I'm not sure if I have any of my Colombian culture. But if you ask my boyfriend, he will say that I have a Latin anchor, but that's not my decision to make. But yes, the Colombian culture will also, but the Colombian look will always be a part of me, and I think it's great. But also as an adopted kid, I very often get this question, have you met your real parents? And the word that is triggering me is the word real, because I of course define my adoptive parents as my real ones. Right. So once I saw this interview with a Danish TV host who was adopted from India. And she said something that stayed with me, and I quote, "Whenever someone asks me, where's your real parents, I answer, my real parents live in Aalborg in Denmark, but my biological organs lives in India." And I think about this sentence very often, because nothing is, as also like you said, nothing is bigger than love, and love is family, and family is love. And that has nothing to do with the genes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you. As are your pajamas.
Thank you. Dark language.
It's just so nice to hear this perspective, Phoebe, to me from an adult.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Maria, thank you so much.
Welcome.
You make me think about who tells us what we are, and who gets to tell us what we are. I recently heard first mother. Not that I consider myself like runner up, but like the birth mother's the first mother. Like many of us get many mothers in life if we're lucky. And so his birth mother would be his first mother, who I don't know anything about yet. And yet I know that she made an incredibly important decision for her baby that could only have been made out of love.
Yeah. Thank you. Phoebe, Lemmy is 10 years old now. And I just want to ask you, how is he? How is he? And can we see some pictures?
Yes. So Lemmy's 10. He's fantastic. He's a great person. So glad I met him. And he does not want me to use his 10-year-old image for public use. He did, however, allow me to use some pictures of him when we first met him and adopted him for the show. And we can use them again right now.
We're seeing
And
them.
just so you know, I'm being charged for use of each image. He asked for, his rate went up. It's $7 an image per performance.
Yay, capitalism.
It's himself.
Beautiful. So Phoebe, I'm thinking about what Maria just said and about her experience. And I want to ask you, how soon did you start telling Lemmy the story about his adoption? Oh, that's a beautiful picture. And what story did you tell him? You can share with us.
Yeah, the story I told him, I cribbed pretty heavily from Molly Bloom, the character in James Joyce's Ulysses. And I would tell him as a baby from the beginning how this all happened in a way that I felt emphasized how much yes there was in such a story that starts with a big no. And it goes something like this. Your birth mother went to Yehoshua and said, can you find a mama and a dada for this baby? And Yehoshua said, yes. And Yehoshua sent your picture to me and to Dada and said, can you be this baby's mama and dada? And we said, yes. And we got on a plane and we flew to Ethiopia and we got in the van and the van came to the gate and we said, would they open the gate? Yes. And so we got through the gate and we got out of the van and we went up to the door and we said, can you open the door? Yes. And we opened the door and we went to your bed and we said, is this our baby? Yes. May we pick him up? Yes. And Dada picked you up and he cried and I clapped and you laughed. And yes, we will. Yes, we do. Yes, we are. Yes.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. That was just so touching. And I'm still grinning from looking at
little Lem.
And that hug, it's just beautiful. I think that all of the near 100 people that join us tonight could feel that love through Zoom. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us tonight and for sharing yourself with us tonight. It was just a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you to GBH. Thank you so much, Shoshi. And to Susan Spurlock and to the Ford Forum at Suffolk University. I'm so happy you wanted to hear it. So thanks for having, and to your students, to the bright new future of tomorrow.
Yes, thanks so much to all the students, and I hope that that participate and all the people from the audience. I'm hoping that at some point in the near future, we can bring Phoebe to the Modern Theater when we'll get back to normal. Thank you.
And thank you, Shoshi, for your extraordinary moderating. Phoebe, thank you so much for your beautiful, moving, poignant storytelling. It has just been a true pleasure to have you here with us. It has been just one of the honors of my life to host this trilogy with women storytellers bearing witness. These women have captivated us. They have talked with such heart and power, starting with Laurel Levitt upon the publication of her latest book, The Objects That Remain. She was followed by Alba Limo and Patricia Davis with the discussion and parts of the one woman play Digna, honoring a Mexican human rights lawyer who was murdered. And Phoebe, you have just rounded out just an incredible 3-part series. We are just so grateful for all of these captivating women. Again, I want to thank WGBH for co-sponsoring this trilogy and for doing such an amazing job of producing these talks. Thank you, Annie Schreffler and Lori Jo, Alessandro. I want to thank all of the moderators and all the women who Shoshi has lifted up, who made this series possible. And I mostly also want to thank the audience for joining us this evening. WGBH has posted the link for the other two talks that will be posted on the WGBH Forum Network platform in the coming week. So if you missed the other two, I hope you will take a time to take a look at those. This has been a really moving and extraordinary series. So, and thank you to our audience as well for joining us. And I hope you have a very lovely evening. Thank you again.